Captain Lee Tae-min stood on the bridge of his ship, watching the stars through the wide window. The diplomatic vessel Harmony's Edge was heading home after another successful mission. For 3 weeks, he and his crew had helped 2 alien species stop fighting over a mining colony. Now both sides were happy, and peace ruled again in that sector. "Captain, we're getting a signal," said Communications Officer Park So-jin. She was young but smart, one of the best in the human fleet. "It's coming from the outer rim near Kalari space." Lee turned to look at her. "What kind of signal?" "Emergency broadcast, sir. Multiple ships in distress." Park So-jin's fingers moved quickly over her controls. "The signal is weak, but I can make out some words. Something about attacks. Complete destruction." Commander Kim Min-ho, the ship's security chief, walked over to Lee's chair. He was a big man with careful eyes who had served in Earth's military before joining the diplomatic corps. "Sir, should we investigate?" Lee thought for a moment. The Kalari were a peaceful people who spent their time studying science and art. They had never hurt anyone and had no enemies. If they were in trouble, something was very wrong. "Change course for Kalari space," Lee ordered. "Best speed." The journey took 2 days. During that time, they tried to contact the Kalari government, but got no response. They tried reaching other ships in the area, but the space was silent. As they got closer to the Kalari home system, Park So-jin picked up strange energy readings. "Captain, I'm reading massive debris fields ahead," she reported, her voice tight with worry. "On screen," Lee said. The main display showed what had once been a beautiful star system. The Kalari homeworld still hung in space, but something was terribly wrong. Where green continents and blue oceans should have been, there was only gray ash and burning craters. The planet's 3 moons were gone, blown apart into spinning rocks and dust. "Dear God," whispered Dr. Yang Hee-rim, the ship's doctor and science officer. "What happened here?" Before anyone could answer, the ship's alarm started screaming. "Multiple contacts coming out of hyperspace," shouted Kim Min-ho. "Big ships, unknown design." 8 massive warships appeared around them like hunting wolves. Each one was 3 times the size of the Harmony's Edge, covered in armor and bristling with weapons. They moved with the smooth precision of a military fleet that had done this many times before. "This is War Commander Vorthak of the Hegemony 4th Fleet," came a voice over the communications channel. The voice was cold and emotionless like a machine. "You are in restricted space. Identify yourselves," Lee stepped forward. As a diplomatic captain, he had dealt with hostile aliens before. "This is Captain Lee Tae-min of the Human Confederation vessel Harmony's Edge. We're responding to a distress signal." "What happened to the Kalari?" There was a pause, then something that might have been laughter. "The Kalari have been removed. They refused to submit to hegemony rule, so they were eliminated. All traces of their civilization have been cleansed from this system." The words hit the bridge crew like physical blows. Park So-jin made a small sound of horror. Dr. Yang covered her mouth with her hands. Even Kim Min-ho, who had seen combat before, looked shocked. "You destroyed an entire species?" Lee asked, his voice carefully controlled. "Correction. We eliminated a source of future rebellion. The Kalari were weak and useless. Their removal improves galactic efficiency." Vorthak's voice carried no emotion at all, as if he was discussing the weather. "Now, human vessel, you will surrender for inspection. Any resistance will result in your destruction." Lee looked around his bridge. His crew was waiting for orders. The Harmony's Edge was a diplomatic ship with light shields and only basic weapons. Against 8 hegemony warships, they had no chance in a fair fight. But Lee had not survived 20 years in space by fighting fair. "Commander Kim, prepare for emergency jump to hyperspace," he said quietly. "All power to engines and shields." "Sir, they'll fire on us the moment we try to run," Kim warned. "I know. Do it anyway." Lee opened the communication channel again. "War Commander Vorthak, we are a diplomatic vessel on a peaceful mission. We're going to leave this system now." "Negative. You will surrender immediately or be destroyed." "I don't think so," Lee said, and his voice carried something new, something hard and cold that made his crew look at him with surprise. "Kim, execute jump, now." The Harmony's Edge leaped forward like a startled animal. At the same moment, the hegemony ships opened fire. Bright energy beams lit up space, but Lee's ship was already moving. It twisted and turned between the attacks, using every trick Lee had learned in his years of service. "Jump drive charging," called the engineering officer. 30 seconds. More energy beams lashed out. One caught the ship's rear shields and the bridge shook violently. Sparks flew from damaged consoles. "Shields down to 40%, Kim reported. 20 seconds to jump. Another hit, this one on the port side. The lights flickered and the artificial gravity wavered for a moment. 10 seconds. Lee gripped his chair as the hegemony ships closed in for the kill. Then space twisted around them, and the Harmony's edge vanished into hyperspace. They emerged 3 star systems away, their ship damaged, but alive. The crew sat in stunned silence, trying to process what they had seen. "Captain," Park Seo-jin said finally, "should we report this to the Confederation Council?" Lee stared at the hyperspace tunnel rushing past the windows. His mind was racing, putting together pieces of a terrible puzzle. The hegemony had destroyed the Kalari without warning or negotiation. They had spoken of efficiency and removing sources of rebellion. This was not a random attack. This was the beginning of something much larger. "Yes, send the report," he said. "But also send a message to Earth Command. Priority Alpha." Kim Min-ho raised an eyebrow. Priority Alpha was reserved for threats to human space itself. "Sir?" Lee turned to face his crew. For 30 years, humanity had been the galaxy's diplomats and peacekeepers. They had built their reputation on finding peaceful solutions to conflicts. They had convinced everyone, including themselves, that they were civilized beings who had moved beyond warfare. But watching the Kalari homeworld burn, something ancient had awakened in Lee's mind. Something that whispered about survival and the price of peace. Something that reminded him that humans had not always been diplomats. "Tell Earth Command that the galaxy is about to learn something it's forgotten," Lee said quietly. "Tell them it's time to remember what we really are." As the Harmony's edge raced toward human space, carrying news of genocide and the promise of war, Lee stood alone on his bridge. He thought about the Kalari children who would never grow up, the Kalari artists whose works were now ash, the Kalari scientists whose discoveries were lost forever. The hegemony thought they were efficient. They thought they were strong. They had no idea what was coming for them. In the depths of space, the message raced ahead of them toward Earth. Soon, the galaxy would discover that humans had not forgotten how to fight. They had simply chosen not to. That choice was about to end. Admiral Song Woo-jin sat in the emergency meeting room deep inside Earth Command headquarters. Around the large table were the most important military leaders in human space. The news from Captain Lee's ship had reached them 6 hours ago, and no one had slept since. "Show me the recording again," Song said. The holographic display lit up, showing the burned remains of the Kalari homeworld. The room fell silent as they watched the destruction. 50 billion people had lived on that world. Now there was nothing but ash. General Choi Yun-ah, commander of the Earth Defense Forces, spoke first. "How many ships did they use for this?" "Intelligence estimates at least 200 warships," replied Director Lim Jae-sung, head of Human Intelligence Services. He was a thin man with gray hair who rarely showed emotion, but today his hands shook slightly as he read from his tablet. The attack was coordinated and complete. They didn't just destroy the cities, they cracked the planet's crust and boiled away the oceans. Dr. Yang Hye-rim, the military historian, leaned forward. She was an old woman who had studied every war in human history. This wasn't just conquest, this was extermination. They wanted to make sure nothing of Kalari civilization could ever return. Song nodded grimly. "What do we know about this hegemony?" Lim pulled up new data on the display. "They're a military empire from the far side of the galaxy. We've had minimal contact with them for the past century. They control about 200 star systems through conquest and forced alliance. Their technology is advanced, and their military doctrine focuses on overwhelming force and total victory." "Numbers?" asked Choi. "Best estimates put their fleet strength at over 10,000 capital ships plus support vessels. They have at least 50 worlds that are purely military manufacturing centers." The room went quiet. The entire human fleet consisted of less than 300 ships, most of them designed for exploration and diplomacy. "Sir," said a young officer at the end of the table, "the Confederation Council has called an emergency session. They want to discuss a diplomatic response to the hegemony threat." Song almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. Diplomatic response. They want to talk to people who just wiped out an entire species. Dr. Yang spoke up. "With respect, Admiral, that's exactly what the galaxy expects us to do. For 30 years, We've been the ones who solve problems with words instead of weapons. Everyone sees us as the peaceful humans who gave up war when we reached the stars. Maybe that was a mistake, Choi said quietly. Song looked at her. General Choi was one of the few military leaders who remembered the old days, before humanity joined the galactic community. She had been a young soldier during the last conflicts on Earth, before the planet unified under the world government. Explain, Song said. Choi stood and walked to the display. When we joined the Confederation, we made a choice. We decided to be diplomats and peacekeepers instead of conquerors. We convinced ourselves and everyone else that we had evolved beyond warfare. She paused, looking at the images of the destroyed Kalari world. But we didn't evolve beyond it. We just stopped practicing it. Dr. Yang nodded slowly. The galaxy thinks we're naturally peaceful because we act peaceful. They don't understand that peace is a choice we make every day, and choices can be changed. Director Lim pulled up classified files that made the room's security systems activate. 3 days ago, I activated Protocol Red Dawn. These are the assets we've kept hidden for the past 30 years. The display showed shipyards that shouldn't exist, hidden deep in asteroid fields and rogue planets. Weapons manufacturing facilities that violated several galactic treaties. Training centers where humans practiced forms of warfare that the galaxy had banned. We never stopped preparing for war, Lim continued. We just stopped talking about it. While the galaxy thinks we have 300 ships, we actually have over 2,000. While they think our weapons are defensive, we have arsenals that could sterilize star systems. Song felt something cold settle in his stomach. Why wasn't I told about this? Because you didn't need to know, Dr. Yang said gently. Because we hoped you would never need to know. Protocol Red Dawn was designed for exactly this situation. When humanity faces a threat that diplomacy cannot solve, Choi returned to her seat. Admiral, the Confederation will spend months debating what to do about the hegemony. They'll form committees and subcommittees. They'll send diplomatic missions and try to find peaceful solutions. And while they talk, more species will die. So what are you suggesting? We don't wait for the Confederation, Lim said. We act alone. We show the galaxy what humans are really capable of when we stop pretending to be something we're not. Song looked around the table. These were good people, dedicated to protecting humanity and maintaining galactic peace. But in their eyes he saw something that hadn't been there before. Something hard and cold and angry. If we do this, he said slowly, there's no going back. The galaxy will never see us the same way again. We'll lose our role as peacekeepers and mediators. Sir, said Captain Kang Da-un, who had been silent until now. She commanded the stealth reconnaissance ship Silent Hunter, one of humanity's most classified vessels. Permission to speak freely? Granted. The galaxy's peace was built on the assumption that species like the hegemony could be contained through diplomacy. That assumption just died with the Kalari. She stood and faced the Admiral. If we don't act now, if we let the hegemony continue their expansion, there won't be a galaxy left to keep peace in. Song closed his eyes and thought about his daughter, who was studying art on one of the colony worlds. He thought about the billions of humans who had never known war, who lived their lives believing that violence was something from the past. Then he thought about the Kalari children who would never grow up. Dr. Yang, he said, in your opinion, what happens if we reveal humanity's true military capabilities? The old historian considered the question carefully. Short term, we win. Humans are very good at war, Admiral. We evolved for it in ways that most galactic species didn't. We understand tactics and strategy and sacrifice in ways they can't match. She paused. Long term, the galaxy fears us instead of trusting us. We become the strong species that others submit to, rather than the wise species that others come to for help. And if we don't act, the hegemony continues their expansion until they reach human space. Then we fight anyway, but from a position of weakness, with fewer allies and more enemies. Song opened his eyes and looked at each person around the table. General Choi, how long to fully activate our hidden fleets? 72 hours, sir. Director Lim, intelligence on hegemony movements. They're massing forces at 3 staging areas. Best guess is they're preparing to hit the Altair Junction next. If they take that system, they control all hyperspace routes in this sector. Song stood up. Around the table, the others followed suit. Ladies and gentlemen, as of this moment, humanity is at war with the hegemony. We will not ask the Confederation for permission. We will not wait for diplomatic solutions. We will show this enemy what humans are capable of when they threaten innocent life. He walked to the communication console and opened a channel to every human ship and station in the galaxy. This is Admiral Song Woo-jin, commanding officer of Human Fleet Command. Effective immediately, all diplomatic vessels are to withdraw to safe positions. All military assets are to report for duty under wartime protocols. To every human serving, in the galactic community, I say this: the time for peace has ended. The time for war has begun. As the message went out across human space, Song turned back to his officers. The galaxy is about to learn something they've forgotten about humanity. We didn't become peaceful because we're naturally gentle. We became peaceful because we know what we're capable of when we're not. Outside the headquarters, the hidden shipyards began to wake up. Weapons that had been stored for decades were loaded onto ships. Veterans who had hoped never to fight again received activation orders. Humanity was going to war, and the galaxy had no idea what was coming. The Altair Junction hung in space like a spider's web made of light. 3 major hyperspace routes met here, making it one of the most important navigation points in this part of the galaxy. Control Altair, and you controlled all shipping and military movement for 50 star systems. War Commander Vorthak studied the tactical display from the bridge of his flagship. 300 hegemony warships surrounded the system, ready to claim it for the Empire. Intelligence reports said the junction was defended by a single Confederation patrol station and maybe a few light cruisers. Status report, Vorthak ordered. All ships in position. War Commander, replied his tactical officer. No significant resistance detected. We can begin the operation at your command. Vorthak smiled. The Kalari had been good practice, but this would be even easier. The Confederation species were weak, more interested in trade and diplomacy than real military power. They would surrender quickly once they saw the size of his fleet. Begin the attack, he ordered. The hegemony fleet moved forward in perfect formation. Their ships were massive, designed to overwhelm enemies through sheer firepower and intimidation. Each one carried enough weapons to destroy a city, but as they approached the junction, something unexpected appeared on their sensors. War Commander, the tactical officer said, his voice uncertain. I'm reading 12 ships moving to intercept us. 12? Vorthak looked at the display. What kind of ships? Unknown design, sir. They're human ships. Vorthak had heard of the humans. They were the galaxy's diplomats and peacekeepers, famous for solving conflicts with words instead of weapons. Their ships were small and lightly armed, designed for exploration and negotiation. Humans, he said with amusement. Open a communication channel. The main screen lit up, showing the bridge of the lead human vessel. A man in a simple uniform stood at the center, his face calm and composed. This is Commodore Shin Dong-hyuk of the Human Defense Fleet. You are ordered to withdraw from this system immediately. Vorthak laughed. Human, you face 300 warships with 12 of your tiny vessels. Surrender now and we will allow you to live as slaves. Commodore Shin looked at him with eyes that seemed oddly cold. No. Then you will die pointlessly. Maybe, Shin said. But you'll die with us. The communication cut off. Vorthak stared at the blank screen for a moment, then shook his head. The humans were even more foolish than he had thought. All ships open fire. Destroy the human vessels. The hegemony fleet opened up with everything they had. Thousands of energy beams and missiles lit up space, all focused on the 12 human ships. But something was wrong. The human vessels moved like nothing Vorthak had ever seen. They twisted and spun through the attack, their ships dancing between energy beams that should have vaporized them. Their formation flowed like water, each ship covering the others in perfect coordination. How are they moving like that? Demanded the tactical officer. Before anyone could answer, the humans returned fire. Their weapons were different from anything in the hegemony database. Instead of energy beams, they used projectile weapons that moved at incredible speeds. Instead of trying to overwhelm enemy shields, they aimed for specific weak points with surgical precision. The first hegemony ship to die was the heavy cruiser Domination. A human missile penetrated its rear shields and detonated inside the engine room. The explosion tore the ship in half. Impossible, Vorthak whispered. But it was just the beginning. The human ships fought with a savagery that defied comprehension. When their weapons ran out, they rammed hegemony vessels at full speed. When their shields failed, they used their damaged ships as weapons, ramming them into enemy formations before the crews escaped in life pods. Commodore Shin's ship, the Relentless, charged directly at Vorthak's flagship. Its hull was torn open and burning, but it kept coming. At the last second, escape pods ejected from its sides and the ship smashed into the flagship's forward shields. The impact sent Vorthak sprawling across his bridge. When he got back to his feet, half his ship's systems were offline. "Damage report," he shouted. "Shields down, weapons offline, engines at 50%, came the reply. Around them, the battle continued to rage. Vorthak watched in horror as his perfectly organized fleet was torn apart by 12 human ships that should have been destroyed in the first few minutes. The humans didn't fight like any species he had encountered. They didn't retreat when outmatched. They didn't surrender when their situation became hopeless. They fought with a desperation and fury that made no tactical sense. But it was working. "Sir, we've lost 80 ships," reported the tactical officer, his voice shaking. "The humans have lost 11. How?" "They're using suicide tactics, sir. They sacrifice their ships to destroy ours. And their coordination. It's like they're sharing the same mind." Vorthak looked at the tactical display. His 300-ship fleet was being destroyed by humans who fought like demons. But it wasn't just their tactics that terrified him. It was the look in their eyes. The humans weren't afraid to die. They welcomed it as long as they could take their enemies with them. "All ships withdraw," he ordered. "Full retreat." But it was too late. The remaining human ship, somehow still functional despite being hit dozens of times, launched one final attack. It accelerated directly toward the largest group of hegemony vessels. Its engines pushed far beyond safe limits. The explosion when it hit was visible from 3 star systems away. When the light faded, the Altair junction was quiet again. Of the 300 hegemony ships that had attacked, fewer than 50 escaped. The humans had lost all 12 vessels, but they had won. Vorthak sat in his damaged command chair, staring at the empty space where his fleet had been. In his long military career, he had conquered dozens of species. He had seen every kind of warfare the galaxy had to offer, but he had never seen anything like the humans. "Send a message to War Prime Vorthak," he told his communications officer. "Tell him we need reinforcements. Tell him the humans are not what we thought they were." As his damaged ship limped away from the battlefield, Vorthak tried to understand what had happened. The humans had been outnumbered 25-1, outgunned, and completely without hope of victory. By every logical calculation, they should have surrendered or fled. Instead, they had chosen to fight and die rather than give up. News of the Battle of Altair Junction spread across the galaxy within hours. The Confederation Council was shocked. The various alien species couldn't believe that 12 human ships had destroyed most of a hegemony fleet. But in the hidden military bases throughout human space, the reaction was different. Veterans who had fought in the old Earth wars nodded grimly. They had seen this before. They knew what humans were capable of when they stopped holding back. Admiral Song received the battle report while standing in the command center of Earth's primary military base. Around him, officers worked frantically to coordinate the mobilization of humanity's hidden fleets. "Commodore Shin's sacrifice bought us time," reported General Choi. "The hegemony will be more cautious now. They know we're willing to fight." "Good," Song replied. "But this is just the beginning. They'll send more ships next time. Many more." Dr. Yang looked up from her analysis station. "Admiral, something interesting about the hegemony commander's report. He keeps mentioning how the humans fought without logic and beyond reason. He doesn't understand our tactics." "Explain." "The galaxy has fought wars for thousands of years, but they've developed rules, codes of conduct, logical limits on how much a species will sacrifice for victory." She paused. "Humans never develop those limits. When we fight to win no matter the cost." Song nodded. "How long before our main fleets are ready?" 48 hours, Choi replied. "Then we have 48 hours to teach the galaxy something they've forgotten." Song turned to address the entire command center. Ladies and gentlemen, Commodore Shin and his crews have shown the enemy what individual human courage looks like. Soon we're going to show them what organized human warfare looks like. He opened a communication channel to the human fleet commanders throughout the galaxy. This is Admiral Song. Phase 2 is now active. All hidden assets are authorized for combat operations. Rules of engagement are simple. Show the enemy no mercy because they will show none to you. As the orders went out, thousands of human ships began moving toward their targets. The galaxy was about to learn that the species they had seen as peaceful diplomats were actually something much more dangerous. They were human. And humans had been born for war. War Prime Vorthak stood before the massive holographic display in his command chamber, studying reports from across the front lines. What he saw made his blood run cold. For 2 months, the hegemony had been fighting humans across 50 star systems. It should have been a simple mop-up operation. The humans were outnumbered, outgunned, and fighting alone while the Confederation Council debated what to do, but the humans weren't fighting like any species Vorthak had ever encountered. Report, he commanded his intelligence chief. The KO. Humans refuse to engage our main fleets, came the reply. Instead, they attack our supply lines, our communication relays, our isolated outposts. They appear from nowhere, strike without warning, and vanish before we can respond. Vorthak studied the tactical map. Red marks showed the locations of hegemony losses over the past month. There were hundreds of them, scattered across space in no apparent pattern. How many ships have we lost? Over 2,000, War Prime. But most of them were supply vessels, transports, and patrol ships. Our main battle fleets remain intact. And how many human ships have we destroyed? The pause that followed told Vorthak everything he needed to know. We're not certain, War Prime. Our estimates suggest perhaps 50 vessels, but the humans seem to have far more ships than our intelligence indicated. Vorthak closed his eyes. 50 human ships destroyed in exchange for 2,000 hegemony vessels. The mathematics of war were turning against him. Show me the latest attack, he ordered. The display changed to show the aftermath of a raid on Supply Depot Gamma 7. The massive station had been designed to supply an entire fleet. Now it was a twisted wreck floating in space. The attack was carried out by 3 human vessels, the intelligence chief continued. They bypassed our patrol ships, destroyed the station's defenses, and eliminated the facility in under 20 minutes. By the time our reinforcements arrived, they were gone. 3 ships destroyed a depot that was supposed to supply 100? Yes, War Prime. The humans used some kind of focused explosive device. It caused a chain reaction that destroyed the entire station. Vorthak opened his eyes and looked at his assembled officers. These were the finest military minds in the hegemony, veterans of dozens of successful campaigns. But now they looked confused and frustrated. What about our attempts to track their movements? Admiral Threnax, his primary fleet commander, stepped forward. The humans seem to have detailed intelligence about our positions and movements. They know where our ships will be before we get there. Meanwhile, we can't track their vessels at all. Impossible. Our sensors are the most advanced in the galaxy. War Prime, I believe the humans have some form of stealth technology that our sensors cannot detect. Their ships appear on our screens only when they're attacking. Vorthak turned back to the tactical display. The red marks seemed to mock him, showing the steady erosion of hegemony power throughout the sector. What about their ground forces? Surely infantry combat will favor us. The silence that followed was even longer than before. War Prime, said Ground Commander Nexus. We've attempted 3 planetary assaults against human positions. All 3 failed. Explain. The humans don't fight like normal ground forces. They use guerrilla tactics, explosive traps, and psychological warfare. They appear to have no fear of death and will sacrifice themselves to eliminate just a few of our soldiers. Nexus activated a recording from the latest assault. It showed hegemony troops advancing through a human colony. Suddenly, explosions erupted from hidden positions. Human soldiers appeared from underground tunnels, struck with devastating efficiency, and vanished again. This footage is from the assault on Colony Beta 9, Nexus continued. We sent 10,000 troops to capture a settlement of 5,000 humans. We lost 7,000 soldiers. The humans lost perhaps 300. Vorthak watched the recording in growing horror. The human soldiers moved with a coordination and ruthlessness that defied belief. They used their own buildings as weapons, collapsing structures on hegemony forces. They fought in ways that seemed designed to maximize enemy casualties rather than minimize their own. How is this possible? He demanded. War Prime. said his chief military advisor. "I believe we have made a fundamental error in our assessment of human capabilities. We assumed they were a peaceful species because they act as diplomats and peacekeepers in galactic affairs. They are peaceful. Their military is tiny compared to ours. Their visible military is tiny, War Prime. But our intelligence now suggests they have been hiding their true capabilities for decades. The ships attacking us are not exploration vessels converted for war. They are purpose-built warships of advanced design." Vorthak felt something he had never experienced before in his long military career. Doubt. "What do you recommend?" "We need to commit our full force, War Prime. All 10,000 ships of the core fleet. We can no longer treat this as a minor campaign. That will leave our home territories undefended. If we don't stop the humans here, there may be no home territories to defend." Vorthak considered this. The hegemony had built its empire through overwhelming force and the threat of total destruction. Species submitted because they knew resistance was futile, but the humans weren't submitting. Instead, they were teaching the galaxy that the hegemony could be hurt. "Very well. Send orders to all fleet commanders. We will gather our forces and strike directly at the human homeworld. Earth will burn and their species will learn the price of defying us." Admiral Threnax looked uncertain. "War Prime, our intelligence on Earth's defenses is limited. We don't know what we might encounter there." "I don't care if they have 1,000 ships," Vorthak snarled. "We will have 10,000. When the galaxy sees Earth in flames, every species will remember why they submit to hegemony rule." As orders went out across hegemony space, Vorthak stood alone in his command chamber. He stared at the tactical display, watching the red marks that showed his losses. In 2 months of fighting, the humans had cost him more ships than he had lost in the previous 10 years of conquest. But what disturbed him most was not the losses themselves. It was the way the humans fought. They showed no mercy, no hesitation, no fear. They fought as if warfare was not just something they did, but something they were. Meanwhile, in a hidden base deep in an asteroid field, Captain Yu Seo-jun received new orders. His wolf pack of destroyers had been hunting hegemony supply convoys for weeks, striking fast and disappearing before enemy reinforcements could arrive. "New target," he told his crew. "Hegemony communication relay at coordinate 77 Alpha. Intelligence says it's lightly defended." His weapons officer, Lieutenant Bei Min-ji, smiled grimly. "How lightly?" "Only about 20 ships." The crew exchanged looks. 20 enemy ships against their 3 destroyers should have been suicide odds. But they had learned something over the past months of fighting. The hegemony expected their enemies to fight fairly, using conventional tactics and respecting the rules of war. Humans had never learned those rules. "Time to departure?" asked his pilot commander Ote Young. 1 hour. "Check your equipment and prepare for combat. And remember, the enemy still thinks we're the peaceful species that resolves conflicts with diplomacy." "Should we tell them the truth?" asked Bei Yu, looked out at the stars through the viewports. Somewhere out there, the hegemony was massing its forces for a strike against Earth. They thought they understood human capabilities. They thought they knew what they were facing. They were wrong. "No," Yu said. "Let them find out for themselves. When they reach Earth, they'll learn what humans are really like when we stop pretending to be something we're not." As his ships prepared to depart for their next raid, Yu thought about the message Admiral Song had sent to all human forces. The enemy expects us to fight like the peaceful diplomats they think we are. Instead, show them what we've always been underneath. Show them that we weren't made for war. We were born for it. The Sol system had never seen so many ships in one place. War Prime Vorthak commanded the greatest fleet in hegemony history, 10,000 warships arranged in perfect formation as they approached Earth. The human homeworld hung before them like a blue and green jewel, beautiful and apparently defenseless. "Final scans complete?" War Prime reported his tactical officer. "We detect approximately 2,000 human vessels in defensive positions around Earth." Vorthak smiled. 2,000 ships against 10,000. Even if the humans fought with their usual reckless courage, the outcome was certain. "Open a communication channel to Earth," he ordered. The main screen showed the bridge of a human ship. Admiral Song Woo-jin stood calmly at the center, his uniform crisp and his expression unreadable. "This is War Prime Vorthak of the hegemony. You are outnumbered 5 to 1, human. Surrender now, and your species will be allowed to serve as slaves. Resist and Earth burns." Admiral Song looked at him with eyes that seemed strangely sad. "War Prime Vorthak, you have attacked peaceful species and committed genocide. You have threatened my homeworld and my people. There can be no surrender. Then you choose extinction. No, Song said quietly. We choose war. The communication ended. Vorthak stared at the blank screen for a moment, then shook his head. The humans were brave, he would give them that. But bravery would not save them from superior numbers. All ships begin the attack. Destroy every human vessel, then sterilize the planet. The hegemony fleet opened fire with devastating force. Thousands of energy beams lanced out toward the human defensive line. The space around Earth lit up like a star as the two fleets clashed. But something was wrong. The human ships moved with a coordination that seemed impossible. They flowed around the hegemony attack like water, each vessel covering the others in perfect harmony. Their return fire was precise and deadly, targeting specific weak points on hegemony ships. How are they doing this? Demanded Vorthak. Before anyone could answer, new contacts appeared on the sensors. Ships were emerging from hidden positions throughout the solar system, behind asteroids, inside the rings of Saturn, from bases on the moons of Jupiter. War Prime, I'm reading massive reinforcements. The human fleet is much larger than we thought. Vorthak looked at the tactical display in growing alarm. The human force was not 2,000 ships. It was closer to 3,000 and more were still appearing. But it wasn't just the numbers that worried him. It was how the humans fought. A hegemony battleship, the Eternal Dominion, found itself surrounded by 6 human destroyers. Instead of trying to escape, the destroyers closed in for close-range combat. 2 of them were destroyed immediately, but the remaining 4 managed to disable the battleship's engines. Then they rammed it. The explosion could be seen from Earth's surface. War Prime, the humans are using suicide tactics on a massive scale, reported his fleet coordinator. They're sacrificing multiple ships to destroy single targets. That makes no sense. They're losing more ships than we are. But they're eliminating our largest vessels, sir. For every battleship we lose, they only sacrifice destroyers or frigates. Vorthak watched in horror as his carefully organized fleet was torn apart by enemies who fought without regard for their own survival. The humans didn't retreat when outmatched. They didn't preserve their forces for future battles. They threw everything into each engagement as if it was the last battle they would ever fight. And slowly, impossibly, they were winning. Sir, flagship approaching from Earth, called the sensor operator. Vorthak looked at the main display and saw a massive human warship moving toward his position. It was larger than anything in their intelligence files, bristling with weapons and armor. This is Captain Lee Taemin of the human vessel Indomitable Will, came a transmission. War Prime Vorthak, you wanted to see what humans are really like. Let me show you. The Indomitable Will opened fire with weapons that defied hegemony understanding. Instead of energy beams, it used projectile weapons that moved at incredible speeds. Instead of trying to overwhelm shields, the projectiles seemed designed to penetrate armor and destroy ships from within. Vorthak's flagship shook under the impact. Return fire. All weapons. The exchange that followed was brutal and short. The human ship took massive damage but kept fighting. Its hull was torn open, its engines were failing, but it continued to pour fire into the hegemony flagship. War Prime, we need to evacuate, shouted his tactical officer. The ship is breaking apart, no. Vorthak grabbed his command chair as another explosion rocked the bridge. I will not retreat from these primitive mammals. But even as he spoke, he could see the truth on the tactical display. His fleet was being destroyed. 10,000 ships, the pride of the hegemony military, were being torn apart by humans who fought like demons. Through the smoke and sparks on his bridge, Vorthak could see Captain Lee's face on the communication screen. The human was bleeding from a head wound and half his bridge was on fire, but he was still standing. You want to know what we are, Vorthak? Lee said, his voice carrying over the sounds of battle. We're the species that learned to fight before we learned to talk. We're the species that survived ice ages and plagues and wars with nothing but stone tools and determination. We're the species that conquered our own planet before we reached the stars. Another explosion shook both ships. Vorthak could see his crew abandoning their stations, running for the escape pods. You think we learned to fight when we reached space? Lee continued. You're wrong. We learned to fight in caves against creatures that could tear us apart with their bare hands. We learned to fight against our own planet, against disease, against extinction itself. Vorthak found himself backing toward his own escape pod as his ship died around him. War isn't something we do. Vorthak, Lee said, and his voice was cold as space. It's something we are. We weren't made for war. We were born for it. The transmission cut off as both ships exploded in a ball of fire that lit up the solar system. When the battle finally ended 6 hours later, the space around Earth was filled with debris from thousands of ships. Of Vorthak's mighty fleet, fewer than 100 vessels escaped to hyperspace. The human fleet had lost nearly half its ships, but Earth still hung safely in space. President Moon Subin stood before the Galactic Confederation Council 3 days later. The great chamber was filled with representatives from hundreds of species, all of them staring at her with a mixture of awe and fear. "Honorable delegates," she began, "for 30 years humanity has served as your diplomats and peacekeepers. We chose that role not because we were weak, but because we understood the alternative." She activated a holographic display showing the Battle of Sol. The assembled aliens watched in stunned silence as human ships threw themselves at hegemony vessels with suicidal courage. "Today, you have seen what humans are capable of when diplomacy fails. We pray you never force us to demonstrate it again." The vote was unanimous. The Confederation granted humanity every territorial concession they requested. Trade agreements were rewritten in humanity's favor. Species that had ignored human diplomatic efforts suddenly became eager to negotiate. But Admiral Song, watching from the human delegation, knew the truth. They had won the war, but they had lost something precious. The galaxy no longer saw humans as wise mediators to be trusted. They saw them as dangerous predators to be feared. Dr. Yang approached him as the session ended. "Admiral, was it worth it?" Song looked out at the alien delegates, all of them giving the human delegation a wide berth as they left the chamber. "We saved the galaxy from the hegemony," he said quietly, "but we may have doomed ourselves to be alone in it." "The price of being apex predators," Yang replied. "Other species can pretend to be civilized because they know we'll handle the real threats, but they'll never fully trust us again." Song nodded. "Perhaps that's better than letting species like the Kalari die while we debate in committees." As they left the chamber, Song thought about Captain Lee and all the others who had died defending Earth. They had given their lives to protect not just humanity, but the entire galaxy. The irony was that the galaxy would remember them not as heroes, but as warriors to be feared. Outside the council building, a young reporter approached Song. "Admiral, what happens now? Will humanity return to its role as peacekeepers?" Song considered the question. In a few months, there would be another crisis somewhere in the galaxy. Some species would threaten another, and the Confederation would look for diplomatic solutions. And when diplomacy failed, they would look to humanity, not because they trusted human wisdom, but because they feared human wrath. "We'll do what we've always done," Song said finally. "We'll try to keep the peace. The galaxy just knows now what happens when peace fails." As his ship departed for Earth, Song stood on the observation deck watching the stars. Somewhere out there, other threats were gathering. Other species were plotting conquest and genocide. And when they came, humanity would be ready. Not because they wanted war, but because they understood something the galaxy was only beginning to learn. Peace was not the absence of war. Peace was war held in check by the knowledge of what war truly cost. And now the galaxy knew that cost. They knew what humans were really like when they stopped pretending to be something else.